With our buildings in place, along with the walkway and the bridge, we're going to work on the secondary structures in the back. You can either begin on the left or right side. We're going to start on the right side, since that's what we've been doing throughout this tutorial. What we're going to do is go to our content browser, search for static meshes, and type the word block. We're going to be using this GenRuins block 02. Select it and drag it into the world. We're going to reduce this draw scale of this object by 0.5 and snap it into place. So that the block matches our foundation and our pillar. Next, we're going to create 3 instances of the same block. Using the Alt, left click and drag on the movement widget, I'm going to clone this guy. Just like that. Make sure that all the pieces are lined up. Looks good. Next, we're going to take the same block and clone it once more into the middle. What we're going to do now is rotate this block to 56.25 degrees. Negative 56.25, sorry about that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move this guy into place so that this edge lines up with our edge of foundation and the edge of this block. Once we have this made, we're going to clone it and then select both of them so that this middle crease lines up with the middle edge of this BSP, like that. We're going to clone this guy one more time, and we're only going to put one of them in the middle over here, as only one can fit. Lastly, we'll take these two and clone them to the far right, and make sure that the middle crease lines up with the middle part of our BSP. So this crease lined up with the middle here, this crease lined up with this middle edge here, and this is in the center. Next, we're going to add in some pillars to the top of these foundations. Go to our content browser and search for paving hole and select this paving hole mesh and drag it into the world. Next, we're going to change the draw scale of the paving hole mesh to 1.3 and then place it on top of our block. Next, we're going to create 3 instances of this paving hole mesh. Doing so creates sort of a pillar. We're going to use this makeshift pillar and clone it 3 more times. Like that. Make sure that the new makeshift pillar is snapped into the blocks. Just like that. Up next, we're going to add in an arch between these makeshift pillars. What we'll do is go to our content browser and search for wall, and find the same wall arch we used on our buildings. This SMCA wall, STRA. Select it and drag it into the world. What we're going to do is change the draw scale of this object to 1.4 and then center it in between the two pillars. Just like that. And then clone this guy over so that this is in the middle here. And then lastly, at the far end. Next, we're going to add in some trim on top of this archway and pillar set. Go to our content browser and search for roof, and you'll find this NEC Roofs SM trim. Select it, what we're going to do is change the scale of this trim to 0.5. And then we're going to rotate it so that this edge of the trim actually faces us. So we'll rotate this first 90 degrees this way, and then 90 degrees, negative 90 this way, and then move it into place. What you want is to have the trim on top of the pillar, not stuck in between it like this. You want it on top of the pillar. And then just duplicate it to the other end. And then select all the pieces and make sure it's roughly in the middle, equidistant on both ends. It doesn't have to be super exact, but something like that works just fine. Now we're going to create the building on top of this pillar set. To create it, we're going to use some of the pieces that we already have. So to begin, select any one of your angled pillar sets. Select all three pieces and clone it. Then rotate it 90 degrees. And move this to the back on top of our round pillar. And line it up so that it is roughly in the middle and on the back end of the round pillar. It's good enough. Then we can just raise it up just a little bit so that we have this angled piece just peeking up above our trim. Next, we're going to add in a wall. Simply select this wall piece that we already have, the angled one, and clone it. Rotate this 90 degrees as well and move it up to our angled pillar on top of our round pillar. And now change the scale of this object to 1. And line it up with the angle of the pillar. that. Next, select the angled pillar set that we have and clone it to the other side of the wall. Now we can add in an arch between these pillars. Just select any arch we have, like this one, and clone it, and move it back here. Change the scale of this object down to 1, and line it up into the middle. Next, we're going to take our window trim piece and clone it as well. Rotate it by 90 degrees and move it up, and change the scale to 1 and the Y draw scale to 1.5, and snap it in between our arch and our wall. Just like that. Now select all of these pieces and clone it over one time. Next, take this bottom wall piece and clone it over. We want 2 clones of this wall piece. Next, we're going to take the same wall piece and clone it up and rotate it back so that it is straight. So we're going to rotate it negative 28.13, sorry, and line it up. And then clone it over. Finally, what we'll do is take this entire piece on the end, all pieces, and clone it to the right side of our wall. Now select the entire segment and line it up into the middle. As you can see, I forgot to select my window frame, so I hit Control Z, and now I make sure I have all my pieces selected, and now I line it up into the middle so that this wall is roughly in the center of these pillars, or you can use these angled pillars as a frame of reference to be on the outside of these 2 center pillars. Something like that. Do not unselect this set of meshes right now, as what we're going to do is go to our top view. If you click up here where it says P, click it once and you'll go to your top view. What we want to do is we want to move this set of buildings a little further back. How far back do we need to move it? You can either guess or you can measure it. To measure, simply hold the middle mouse button and drag. We want to move this object roughly about 400 units back. 400 units takes us to this grid line. So as you can see, we still have our entire mesh segment selected. We have our movement widget, and what we'll do is just drag it back roughly to around this grid line. and then we click on this T in the top corner until we come back to our perspective view. And you can zoom out, and you'll see that the building has moved back. We've moved this back for a purpose, as we're going to fill in the space with various rocks and foliage. Before we add in more details around the level, we're going to add in some more details and depth to this top building. To begin, select this straight wall piece and clone it to the left. Rotate it by 90 degrees. And then snap it into the middle of the pillar and move it to the back. Next, create 2 more instances of the same wall. And I'll select all 3 pieces and clone it to the other side. Next, select one wall segment, clone it again, and rotate it by 90 degrees. And make sure that it's snapped into the back corner. Next, clone this wall segment so that it connects to the segment on the left side. Select all the pieces and center it so it's roughly equidistant on both ends. And with all the pieces selected, clone it up to create another wall segment. What we did here is we created more depth, giving this structure an illusion that it has a room or a space inside of it, rather than this being a flat wall. We don't need to add in any more details, as the focus of the level is actually down here and not so much up there, but we just have that as a frame of reference and an illusion to give that building more realistic look, or semi-realistic look rather. Next, we're going to add in some trim on top of our pillar and our wall. Simply select this trim we already have and clone it. Rotate it by 90 degrees and change the scale to 0.75 and snap it on top of our pillar and arch. And then clone it to the other side. Select all the pieces and make sure it's roughly equidistant on both ends. And before we move on, notice that our trim is actually higher than our wall piece. What we're going to do is we're going to lower our trim so it snaps with our wall, and then move the trim out just a little bit so that we get a sort of a lip over our pillar and our wall and our arch. Lastly, with all these trim pieces selected, clone it one more time and place it on top of this back wall segment. Finally, we're going to add in a roof on top of our trim in the front. So go to our content browser. If you don't already have it, search for roof and find this NEC roof SM tiled solid. We're going to rotate this guy 90 degrees so that the tile is vertical instead of horizontal. So we want it 90 degrees like this. And then we're going to angle it by 33.75 degrees and then snap it into place. and move to the far left, and then clone it to the other side. Select all the pieces and line it up so it's roughly equidistant on both sides. And there we go, our top building is complete.